According to the voice of bank teller Kesha Davis, janitors do not obtain business accounts here. Thundered across the exquisite room, her enormous body looming over an ebony woman who was still. Vanessa Williams, a black woman, glanced up in spite of the storm raging all around her, with eyes that revealed depths no one in that room could comprehend. Her speech sliced like a dagger through the pandemonium. "I'm not sure who you're speaking to, but Kesha was insane, and I understand that you're just another cleaning lady, playing pretend. Please remove your cunning, deceptive hands from my counter." Kesha, like thunder, Davis's words echoed around the exquisite room. Yet what the bank teller was unaware that she had just committed the greatest error of her professional life when she learned who the greatest karma you've ever experienced. Is this story about a liar and a janitor? Ever thought that everyone should be treated with respect at the beginning of this story? Click the subscribe button immediately, regardless of their skin tone. Out of respect. Please leave a comment letting us know where you're viewing from. Vanessa Williams founded Williams Tech and served as its CEO. Solutions is a $47 billion technological company. Yet the majority of individuals her age were Vanessa had established a business that rivaled Silicon while still repaying her school loans, Valley's most well-known figures. Yet she chose to be withdrawn and avoided the limelight. Magazine articles, Forbes interviews, and appearances on the red carpet. She handled business in secret meetings in private boardrooms that were only accessible to the most prestigious circles of the type of people in corporate America who made handshake agreements for billions. In the job badge was attached to her worn jacket, and her faces were seldom seen in public. Was her executive access card to one of her own subsidiary firms, where she had spent time. Not some janitors I did. She often carried out surprise checks in the morning. Keeping in touch with every aspect of her enormous enterprise, recalling the times when she couldn't afford to. Vanessa didn't want any extra notice, so she wore the worn pants to the bank as part of her operations. Kesha, the white bank teller, had worked for Morrison Financial for 12 years. Brutal years, weighing 200 pounds, standing 5'8", and learning to utilize her. Kesha had long-standing biases toward using her physical appearance as a weapon against clients she considered undeserving. According to her perverse reasoning, black women working in service positions are in this. She rose beyond janitors, cleaners, and anybody else who did manual labor at the famous bank, becoming the individual who kept others out and made them feel unworthy. Was a gatekeeper, continuing a vicious circle of cruelty that was ready to make a complete circle in the most terrible way imaginable. When Vanessa went through those, she entered a perfect storm of bigotry and animosity via glass doors that Tuesday morning, which had been after more than 10 years in construction. Vanessa joined Morrison Financial instantly, going up to the teller windows with the straightforward intention of opening a personal. The bank was an Italian marble cathedral of riches, with a checking account distinct from her intricate business banking. Floors with mahogany paneling that shouted ancient money and sparkling chandeliers exclusivity. This was her former neighborhood, and she had picked this branch for personal reasons, where, as a hungry adolescent, she had previously rubbed her forehead against these identical glass doors in hopes of having she could now own the entire building and have enough money to pass through them with dignity. Despite not monitoring her balance, she could still recall the terrified child peering in from the outside without reading it. Everything changed when Kesha noticed the job emblem fastened to Vanessa's jacket. She determined who Vanessa was and where she belonged by asking questions. But this is a high-end bank inside Morrison Financial, not where the bib for Vanessa even made it to the window. Kesha screamed out, "Help comes to cash paychecks." Her voice echoing over the. Vanessa halted when she recognized the tone of the marble lobby with seasoned authority. She had heard it and endured it before, so she knew precisely how this was going to happen. "I'd want to," with tactful elegance. She placed her ID on the desk and stated, "Open a personal checking account." "But Kesha was just beginning, my love," she continued, loading the word condescendingly. "You're not at the right location. Morrison Financial is the check-cashing location down the block. Provide services to a completely different customer from the one that was loaded with," indicating that everyone saw this was about hierarchy and who belonged and who didn't, not banking. Vanessa responded. I understand that this is Morrison financial and social order. Soothing tone, but with hints of complexity. Kesha couldn't imagine I would still wish to register an account. But Kesha made her first disastrous error at that time by failing to complete the professional request. She doubled back with complete assurance. Look, honey, I'm in an attempt to assist you. Our minimal balance needs are significant. Fees are intended for those with substantial assets. You would feel far more at ease in a community bank. Each term was intended to lead you to a location that is better suitable for your circumstances. Vanessa feels inferior in this situation because she is embarrassed of her appearance and her apparent lack of wealth. Kesh was performing at the Temple of Wealth, now displaying her power to the gathering crowd, but she was unaware that she was up against someone who had created billion-dollar enterprises, who had survived corporate warfare that would have decimated lesser individuals and talked with global leaders. The hardships Vanessa had endured and overcome were far worse than a bank teller's hundention. Have you ever pressed the subscribe button and share your content since you were evaluated on the basis of your appearance before anybody ever knew your identity? Experience in the comments, as the subsequent events demonstrate just how risky those presumptions can be. What followed would be remembered as the most disastrous few minutes in banking history. History, because Kesha Davis had already eaten blood in the water. Shown her authority over what she perceived to be merely another housekeeper, attempting to rise beyond her position, unable to resist the urge to kill. Kesha grabbed Vanessa's identification. Her eyes went across the card from the marble counter, which she held up to the light as if she were looking at proof of a crime. Her lips curled into a scowl that developed as she examined every item with theatrical distrust. So you clean offices at some tech company? That's nice, Kesha added. Becoming more apparent by the moment, she waved the ID card in the air in a condescending tone, saying, but here's the issue you don't seem to get is that business accounts are for actual business people, not janitors. The comments struck the opulent lobby like professionals who truly contribute something meaningful to society. Poison circulating among the consumers who had halted their own purchases to see this public as the execution went on. Some people appeared uneasy as they adjusted and shifted in their pricey shoes, their high-end purses, yet none of them raised their voices. Intervened. They all enabled the evil being inflicted on someone they'd known by being silent, having already been written off as unworthy of their attention. Vanessa remained still, her hands clasped in front of her, displaying the professional poise that results from years of situational survival, where everything may be destroyed by one mistake. But if you looked attentively upon closer inspection, you could almost feel the tiny tightness around her eyes. She appeared to be struggling to contain something far more potent than rage, as seen by the subtle stiffness in her jaw. How much do you earn sweeping floors? Kesha went on, raising her voice. 20,000 words per year, 15 and more aggressive with each one, since that's what this is all about. You scraping together a few $100s, isn't it? She leaned forward over the desk and said, you think you can play in the big leagues with people who actually matter? Intimidating the much smaller mother in front of her girls by making the most of her enormous height and weight, like you should. Just use community banks' basic checking accounts, in allocations that serve your target market and where they don't inquire too much about where your money is going. Originates from the racial undertones, which were now more apparent due to the coded language that was completely understood by everyone in the lobby. This went beyond apparent class distinctions. No longer concerned with who should occupy positions of wealth and authority, according to their skin tone and the presumptions others had about it. But Vanessa didn't say anything, allowing Kesha every chance to back off. She was running toward the cliff's edge with complete assurance that she could have put an end to this with a single. Kesha's world might have collapsed in real time, and her identity could have been disclosed over the phone. But something she needed to observe the entire scope of the brutality that individuals were exhibiting in order to gauge how far this would go. Able to act when they believed their victims lacked the strength to defend themselves, and Kesha saw that silence as weakness. Instead of the quiet before a hurricane, chose to intensify much more. Her voice could now be heard across the foyer as she stated, "Let me guess. Making sure that each and every client, every security guard and employee could hear her methodically destroying the dignity of another person, since you get to empty their garbage cans and clean the restrooms at Williams Tech. You undoubtedly feel quite important. Clean their floors." And the reference to Williams Tech ought to have raised a serious red flag that may have made someone more perceptive think twice. But Keisha was too inebriated to see it, too drunk on this infrequent moment of superiority to notice the subtle change in Vanessa's expression. Slender, tiny housekeeper who believes she belongs with actual experts. Keisha, her insults were getting more nasty and personal. "And I bet you don't even have a high school. Do you think you dropped out of school to have children and then realized you needed a job to help pay your bills?" She was now making up a whole made-up background for Vanessa, based only on her own biases and presumptions that every remark was intended to pierce deeper in order to cause the most psychological harm, to guarantee that this obnoxious housekeeper would always remember her position in the social ladder. Keisha added, "Looking like you haven't eaten since your last paycheck," focusing on Vanessa's skinny figure with a cruel chuckle, framed with the accuracy of a predator aiming for the neck. "Maybe if you tried to, you wouldn't look like a scarecrow wearing pricey knockoffs if you focused more on eating real food." Other Morrison financial staff had started to assemble around them, drawn by the chaos and the growing volume. Nevertheless, some of them were truly uneasy about what they were seeing on their expressions. Displaying the sort of second-hand humiliation that results from seeing someone else's total collapse, but due to corporate hierarchy and the unstated, they keep mute. Realizing that confronting Keisha may jeopardize their own employment. At that point, branch manager Marcus Thompson made the decision to show up, but rather than diffusing the situation, the circumstance, rather than using initiative and stopping he did something that would plague him for the rest of his career. He publicly humiliated a potential customer. Keisha's right, Marcus, spoke with the cowardice of someone who would want to be in charge and the power of management. Allow harshness rather than face conflict. This may not be the best course of action for our tradition. We take great satisfaction in catering to customers that recognize the importance. And Morrison Financial's exclusive remarks were the spark that ignited Keisha's simmering brutality into a furious eventually, with management supporting her and formally recognizing her power, as she felt invincible because of the very individuals who were supposed to be shielding clients from this type of behavior. And Vanessa made her move at that point without uttering a word. Keeping that, she delved inside her jacket pocket and found the same unfathomable serenity that had sustained her during the entire journey, took out a business card that was subtle, classy, and uncomplicated. Instead of yelling it, she put that whispered power on the marble counter between them. With the same, Keisha's eyes were fixed on that card like a rocket locating its target, and she displayed the cautious dignity she had displayed from the start. For a brief period, there was a pregnant pause of stillness in the foyer. Something occurs just before anarchy breaks out, and Keisha burst out laughing, but it wasn't simply laughter. Was an unbridled snicker that reverberated off the marble walls, with sparkling chandeliers like shattered glass. She froze, grabbing her "You took this," with sides gasping for air, and between bursts of wild laughter, she managed to gasp. In between giggles, grab the business card and wave it from someone's desk, didn't you? It's all over the place like proof of the most pitiful crime conceivable. This is Williams Tech Solutions. She was performing for a legitimate business with legitimate executives and professionals. Audience now savoring every second of what she thought was her final victory. Cleaning women don't have business cards. Darling, so what will be the next clue that you're the CEO? You own the entire business. And she was so full of sarcasm that you could cut it with a knife. She was so sure that she had exposed Vanessa's most blatant lie that she was nearly crying from laughter. Possible, and other patrons in the foyer began to laugh with her. Enmeshed in the mob mentality of witnessing someone's assumptions tear them apart, however, Vanessa's statement, "I'd like to speak with your manager," should have stopped everyone cold. Her voice pierced through the laughing like a razor through silk as she spoke softly. And that's when Keisha made what is the fatal error that would ruin everything, now demanding managers. She screamed. Her voice reached a pitch that caused everyone in the lobby to gasp. This is a common example of helpful action in this situation. When you are discovered to be a phony, you are caught lying and insist on speaking with a higher authority that will rescue you because she was really insane and now intoxicated, power and confident in her own morality. The business card remained tightly grasped in her palm, and when her anger reached a breaking point, she did something that would have long-lasting effects on the banking industry. Ripped it in two. And then she ripped Vanessa's ID card in two as well. Business cards and pieces of identification flew to the marble as plastic sliced through the foyer like a gunshot, floor like dashed hopes. And Keisha towered above them like a victorious warrior, furious outrage bursting in his chest. "Take your stolen documents and get out," she cried, her voice reverberating off all the surfaces in the tasteful room. We office cleaners posing as executives shouldn't be given accounts. Morrison Financial is not a charity. Group for big dreaming. Deluded janitors, and the hush that ensued was deafening. Everyone in the lobby, including patrons, staff, and security personnel, remained still, shocked by what they had just seen, that someone's identity documents were being destroyed. Was going too far. That event, the most biased onlookers acknowledged that it was completely awful. Yet Keisha wasn't finished standing over the strewn about bits of paper and plastic. She brought what she believed to be this woman, who has been attempting to cheat us, is escorted out of our bank by killing blow security. She is most likely setting up the place for a robbery using stolen documents and phony business cards. Things changed at that point when security officers began approaching them like other patrons. Took out their phones to capture what they believed to be yet another instance of Marcus's public humiliation going viral. Thompson was ready to defend his staff's choice to have Vanessa ejected from the building. The air itself changed, and Vanessa Williams, the CEO of a $47 billion the woman who had been written down as only a housekeeper, after 25 minutes of having their dignity methodically undermined, the individual ultimately determined it was time to demonstrate to them just who they had been interacting with. When the explosion was about to start and the haze cleared, what transpired next would change. Morrison Financial Bank forever. Demonstrate that the person you're harming may occasionally destroy all you've created in return, and sometimes thunder doesn't bring justice. And lightning, yet with subdued speech that trembles the fabric of everything you believed you knew what power was. How would you respond if someone tore your ID and business card and tossed them on the ground? Please leave a comment with your opinions and remember to subscribe. The reckoning was about to start for more tales like this, because when someone has been forced to the limit, when their self-respect has been consistently undermined in front of there are two possible reactions from the throng of witnesses. They might blow up in anger and wrath, or they can transform into something far more dreadful. Vanessa Williams made the decision to be completely calm and quiet. She dropped to her knees on the immaculate marble floor and started gathering the ripped fragments of her ID card. Every motion was methodical and purposeful, even contemplative in its accuracy. Collected and positioned each piece of plastic that Keisha had flung at her feet like trash. The quiet was more horrifying than any scream. Held gently in her palm, conversations had completely ceased in the lobby, even while Keisha was still high during her triumph. She started to notice a change in the environment that made her hair stand up. Vanessa stood slowly, touching the back of her neck with a crude warning. Dust from her old pants, and she took out her phone, running her fingertips over the screen with the lack of experience that befitted someone who had established empires by making decisions one at a time. Her voice was so serene that it was almost mesmerizing as she said, "James, implement Protocol 7. The words were said so quietly that only her closest friends and family could hardly hear them, yet there was a definitive, irreversible quality about her tone that caused everyone in, she said, on earshot, lean in to listen more intently. Morrison Financial. Yes, everything, she said in the same eerily silent voice. Every account, every contract, Every partnership and subsidiary ends all operations with immediate effect. However, Kesha continued to revel in her own seeming triumph and was certain that she had effectively cleaned up this mess, the woman in her place. Couldn't help but phone your supervisor to complain about the cruel treatment, with deliberate malice. The bankwoman mocked her voice as it reverberated across the lobby. Tell them that their janitor was offended because someone at last. She was laughing again as I told her the truth about where she belonged, sound that had reverberated in the lobby. Just before she was totally unaware that she was making fun of someone who had just started something that would ruin all of her hard-earned money for attempting to act like an adult. They could award you a lovely participation trophy. Kesha said. Kept profiting off the apprehensive giggles of some patrons, who still believed they were seeing nothing more than a challenging client being treated well. But in the lobby, something was odd with 24-year-old junior Angela Rodriguez, the teller, who had been horrifiedly seeing this altercation, took out her own phone and was furiously entering search phrases via Google. The CEO of Williams Tech Solutions. The first result that appeared when typing with trembling fingers was a 6-month-old obscure business journal article ago that included a picture from an exclusive technology conference that only the most prestigious industry executives were present. And they stood between Apple CEOs and the lady at Microsoft. Shaking hands with venture investors and international leaders was the same one, who was presently being. Angela's face became white as she scanned through printer paper in their foyer, ashamed, scrambling through other Forbes pieces. Business Week highlights the billions of dollars in filings, and all sources verified this. The lady Kesha had been destroying for the last 30 minutes was an inconceivable fact. Vanessa Williams, the creator and chief executive officer of Williams Tech Solutions, was among the most. Sir Angela frantically called out to the world's most prominent tech businesses. I believe we made a grave error in attempting to get Marcus Thompson's attention, sir, but Marcus was still enjoying satisfaction of having backed his top employee's bold move. He dismissed Angela with a wave. Centered on what he thought was the effective termination of an unwelcome client. Angela, don't allow her to influence with condescending authority, he remarked. You too. Some individuals are really adept at playing the victim when they are exposed for their deceptions, which is precisely why we have proof and verification. Angela watched the search results on her phone screen in increasing worry. Following confirmation from the search results that they had just committed corporate suicide in the most visible manner imaginable, she attempted. Mr. Thompson, you must see this. Her voice is more urgent this time. This lady isn't enough. And Angela. Marcus abruptly interrupted her. I'm pleased of Kesha because she handled the issue flawlessly. I don't want to hear anything more about it. Upholding our standards? But Marcus was praising himself for a job well done at the time. 3 stories above them, in the executive offices of Morrison Financial Patricia Morrison, a catastrophe was taking place. Hayes, the bank's president and the heir to a long-standing business dynasty. 4 generations were studying quarterly reports in her corner office when her phone began to ring. It wasn't the kind her direct lines jingle, but the emergency line's loud, persistent buzz. It didn't ring till a terrible, disastrous event had happened, missing a panicked voice. Morrison Hayes, her assistant, said, We have a scenario where Williams Tech Solutions they are stating online that they wish to end their contract, which is worth $10.2 in her veins. Patricia's blood turned to ice. Not only was Williams Tech their biggest customer, but they also served as the cornerstone for Morrison Financial's overall expansion. Approach was developed since losing that contract would result in a financial crisis in addition to harming their quarterly results. That's impossible, Patricia told her, referring to the avalanche that may completely demolish the bank. Despite the fear tearing at her breast, her voice remained steady. We just extended that contract 6 months ago, and it's locked in 4 or 5 years. They can't just be, ma'am. Her aide cut her off mid-sentence. They claim there was an incident in the main lobby, which has never happened in their 15 years of working together, regarding the mistreatment of Ms. Williams. The phone fell out of Patricia's Venus Williams, the reclusive tech clattered her fingers over her mahogany desk. Genius, who handled business through secret conferences and private conversations rather than public appearances because of Morrison Financial's reputation. A woman explicitly asked them to manage her personal banking because of her professionalism and caution. Patricia's legs were moving in front of her. After processing everything, she dashed through the executive hallways, her high-end shoes clicking like machine gun fire hitting marble floors, her pulse thumping rhythmically. That, with each beat, shouted catastrophe as she ran through the main doors dubbed like a natural force. Her eyes instantly searched the throng for the one face that has the power to either rescue or destroy everything. And there they were, standing in the middle of the classy room with their identity shredded. Vanessa Williams was strewn at her feet. Patricia knew her right away since they had met at exclusive CEO round TS, industrial conferences and private business dinners that took place in a privileged setting of power and impact that the most of people were unaware of. Vanessa was younger than the majority of there was something about her that made other IT executives more reticent and silent, presence that even the most haughty millionaires respected. And now, Kesha Davis was hovering over her as she stood in Patricia's lobby, looking like she had been through a meat grinder. "Miss Williams," she said, displaying a smug sense of pleasure that made Patricia's stomach flip. As the enormity of the catastrophe set in, Patricia's voice was hardly audible above a whisper. "Oh, dear God. What has transpired here?" The tone in the lobby changed instantly, and total. All movements and conversations ended, and the air itself stopped. Appeared to solidify as both staff and clients realized that something significant was happening. Something that would completely transform the lives of everyone in the room, including Patricia's immediate. The throng here was shocked by the woman's difference from the one they had all written off as a cleaning lady, was a lady who was respected by senators and judges of the Supreme Court and served as president of Morrison Financial. Showing this janitor the respect that heads of state often get. I sincerely apologize for Patricia's persistent, trembling voice as she took in the image of the shredded, recognizing the fragments of business cards and Vanessa's appearance of complete composure, which somehow expressed more threat than any outburst of fury could have. However, Kesha continued to function in the world she had created, in which she was the protagonist. Couldn't comprehend what she was seeing in this story. "You know this cleaning lady?" she inquired. Unaware of the reality, she continued to speak in the same patronizing tone that she had been using all morning. Patricia turned to face Kesha, saying she was talking to her employer's supervisor. And look of terror so intense that it was nearly painful to watch. The weight of 4 generations of banking history came tumbling down in real time with her speech. "This is Vanessa Williams. Patricia, the CEO and creator of Williams Tech Solutions, is our single biggest customer, with a net value of $47 billion. 0.30% of our entire assets under management are represented by the silence." Fate ensued was so comprehensive that it seemed as though the world had ceased to exist. Kesha's face displayed a range of looks that, had they not been recording the event, would have been hilarious. Confusion gave way to incredulity when a person's whole reality was destroyed. Disbelief gave way to a growing sense of terror. And when the reality became apparent, the horror crumbled into total destruction. Eventually made it into her mind. Marcus Thompson's knees gave way. Ash came to the realization that after 15 years of advancing in his job and forming connections, he had 30 minutes of egregious bad judgment had just destroyed reputation, verified but afraid. Angela Rodriguez grabbed her phone like a lifeline while she watched in the most visible manner imaginable, the building's influential individuals learn that they have just committed financial suicide. However, Vanessa's response, which she chose not to scream, would haunt everyone in that lobby for the rest of their lives. She didn't get angry, gloat, threaten, or expect instant gratification. Rather, she started talking in the same quiet, serene tone that had defined her whole attitude from the minute she entered the building. "Your employee thought I was a janitor." The words "cleaning" and "because I'm black" sank into the quiet, like stones into motionless water. Since this bank is for actual business people, Women don't deserve business accounts. She asked about my salary, and the recounting was terrible in its cool delivery and surgical in its accuracy. She informed me that girls like me should only work at community banks because of how much money I made sweeping floors. I'd probably since cleaning ladies don't have business cards. Someone swiped mine off a desk. Patricia's face became whiter with every admission, and Marcus dug further into his own personal torment, and Kesha started to realize that she hadn't simply made when I invited her to speak. She made a mistake and spent 30 minutes acting cruelly without restraint, ruining herself and everyone around her. Vanessa went on to say with a manager. She stated that was usual assistance conduct and went on to rip up my identity papers while yelling that office cleaners shouldn't be given accounts. Keisha made a valiant attempt to salvage anything from the devastation of her life by posing as CEOs. I wasn't saying that I was sorry because I didn't recognize you. But Vanessa's like a laser cutting through tissue paper. Your remarks sliced through her pleas and gave you the exact impression you desired. She spoke with the authority of someone who has lived her entire life battling preconceptions and biases. You determined that a black woman wearing plain clothing was unworthy of your attention. Patricia was providing a service beneath your dignity and under your basic human decency. Everyone involved has been fired immediately, and they all sincerely apologize. Comprehensive policy changes, monetary compensation, everything that may save her bank's relationship. But Vanessa Williams had already established her choice to contact James wasn't a bluff or a ploy to negotiate. Rather, if having been the application of now irrevocable consequences, the contract is terminated, she stated, with a finality that reverberated like a death nail throughout the marble foyer. This conversation is over. And with those, Kesha Davis said that Morrison Financial Bank started to go bankrupt. Seen Marcus Thompson and her career and reputation vanish into thin air. Learned that permitting cruelty has a cost that may ruin everything. You've dedicated your life to creating the most costly lesson in banking history. And she left the lobby after being written off as only a cleaning lady, demonstrating that occasionally the person ground you foot on now is the one you'll be pleading to stand on tomorrow. Tell us in the comments and click subscribe if you would have forgiven the bank or canceled the contract as well. Button right away, since there are a lot more elements in this narrative than just the silence that has. Vanessa Williams left Morrison Financial Bank. The person who followed her was the sort of silence that follows earthquakes, explosions, and that time when everything you believe to be true about the universe is totally contradicted by her. Actions reverberated one more time across the marble floor, each sound signaling the conclusion of an era for everyone who was left behind. When Patricia Morrison Hayes fell into that ruined lobby, the closest chair, her legs finally failing under the strain of what had just happened to her after 4 generations, Morrison Financial was transformed by a family into one of the nation's most prominent financial firms. As she just witnessed 30 minutes of staff misbehavior ruin everything. A woman who had led boardroom negotiations with Fortune 500 CEO SA's leaders of state sat there looking at the ripped bits of identification strewn all over her billion-dollar deals. The tears that fell on the marble floor like confetti from her own burial. Patricia's eyes were filled with more than simply remorse. They were tears of pure destruction at realizing that all her grandfather owned was constructed by her great-grandfather. Enlarged everything she had spent and everything her father had modernized. Her entire career had just been destroyed by 2 workers' unbridled bigotry for 30 minutes, who ought to have been more aware of the sophisticated lobby that has already represented exclusivity and distinction. The crystal suddenly seemed like a cemetery. Chandeliers that once saw billion-dollar handshake agreements now shine over the ruins of a reputation. The Italian marble flooring that had been traversed by prime ministers and presidents were now unrepairable. The immediate aftermath, which was smeared with the blood of institutional suicide, was quick and violent, like witnessing a controlled demolition in reverse. When decades of meticulous preparation were used to bring down a structure, the explosive, incompetent security guards destroying the structure are the same ones who had been Kesha Davis was escorted from the premises as a terminated employee after they were contacted to remove Vanessa as a fraud employee. There was no formality, no chance for clarifications. No, sorry. She didn't have time to tidy her desk or said farewell to coworkers who everybody regarded her as though she had caught a communicable illness that may ruin their careers as well after 12 years of work. 12 minutes of surveillance footage where examined Patricia Morrison Hayes' 12 minutes. Recognizing that each and every phrase high-quality footage of Vanessa's speech was obtained by their security cameras. 12 minutes of realizing that the most costly hate crime in banking history had just been perpetrated by Keisha Davis, the security. Officers that accompanied Keisha were seen on camera from 6 distinct perspectives. They were professional, almost polite, and neither harsh nor spiteful. They had no joy in seeing a human being's entire existence destroyed, as they recognized that, in other ways, their kindness made things worse by emphasizing the difference between Vanessa's treatment and how even a more dignity was being shown to the humiliated former employee than to Morrison. Financial's largest client, Marcus Thompson, was demoted right away, which was oddly much more terrible than his complete discharge. The entry-level teller lost his parking space, corner office, power, and management title, his invitation to management meetings, his key card, and access to executive floorsuite. Work in a field where news spreads quickly throughout the remaining years of his career. Whatever long that might be, reputations endure a lifetime of service to the very clients he once despised. Every day, the bank serves as a warning to everyone about the consequences of condoning cruelty rather than putting an end to it. Implied that Marcus would have to make his mortgage payments on an entry-level income after reaching 6 figures. Would become unaffordable, his wife's respect would have to be sacrificed, and his children's private school tuition would have to be dropped. Go along with their social status. He had turned into a warning story that was discussed in financial circles. Manager, who, in the worst conceivable way, ruined his career by supporting the wrong horse. But the true destruction was only starting to take shape and was causing so much business harm that it spread like a virus throughout the financial globe. Control could stop the incident's word from spreading within hours. Through the financial industry, such as corporate rumors spread by social media, financial journalist networks, and the widely shared video evidence that was recorded by dozens of consumers using their phones. Morrison works in a field where reputation is crucial and trust is the only money that matters. Financial recently demonstrated that they could not be relied upon to handle any of its clients with even the most basic human decency. Ruin. A $47 billion person based on preconceived notions about her appearance? The article went viral with the type of information that suggested how they would treat everyone else. Hash banking is typically used for political corruption and celebrity scandals due to its speed and intensity, but black began trending 6 hours later. With the Morrison financial scandal trailing closely after, the janitor CEO served as a catalyst for others to share their personal accounts of being assessed. More on the basis of looks than the story was then taken up by financial news networks who ran with it as if their ratings depended on it. CNBC Lee Bloomberg made headlines after a financial institution lost billions due to a racist event following its discrimination against tech CEO Fox. Morrison Financial faces bankruptcy. Every network found a way to show how political correctness lost shareholders everything when businesses adopted woke banking that suited their audience, but they all concurred that this year's largest business collapse was the stock market disaster. The market's reaction was swift and brutal. Morrison Financial's stock price not only dropped, but also fell in a fashion that caused retirement planners to begin making emergency phone calls and seasoned traders to grab their antacids. 45% of their consumers overnight in a free fall that ruins retirement accounts and bankrupts pension funds after decades of prudent investment. Investors ran away from a sinking ship like rats, realizing that a bank that had recently lost its biggest customer due to pure prejudice was a bank that had little institutional investment potential. Even the most devoted investors withdrew their money, and mutual funds sold their Morrison Financial assets. Investors whose families had held Morrison stock for many generations started phoning their brokers to sell directives. The financial press had a field day that lasted for weeks. The billion-dollar discrimination lawsuit that stunned Wall Street from janitor to justice involved banking, while black, the most costly racism in Morrison. Financial everything was caused by preconceptions, corporate history. Morrison Financial's demise when discrimination and power collide. The headline said that 30 minutes ruined a financial dynasty, but Dignity refuted this. Legal experts offered their opinions, each of them adding another nail to Morrison Financial's business coffin. Attorneys for prospective discrimination claims began contacting Vanessa's reps for civil rights when groups called for inquiries. The Federal Reserve declared they were the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, launched a formal investigation after examining Morrison's financial procedures. State banking authorities started posing awkward inquiries on institutional prejudice. Banks contacted corporate sensitivity training in an attempt to demonstrate that they weren't. For example, diversity and inclusion consultants at Morrison Financial began to earn seven-figure contracts from organizations that are afraid of having their own Kesha Davis HR departments across Morrison was used in the finance sector's required retraining programs. Financial as a warning about the consequences of unrestrained discrimination. However, the true destruction wasn't gauged by media headlines, market prices, or government probes. Rather, it was in terms of lives lost as a result of the knock-on consequences of 30 minutes of brutality that went uncontrolled and spread like circles from a stone tossed into motionless water. 6 months later, the disaster's full extent was revealed. Revealed in the startling institutional breakdown statistics. Morrison Financial was had to shut down 12 locations in 3 states, not because they weren't making money, but rather because they couldn't sustain the clientele required to keep them running. 4,000 tellers, managers, security personnel, janitors, accountants, and customers' IT professionals, administrative assistants, loan officers, and service representatives. Marketing coordinators were let go for no fault of their own. Yet Becca's 2 individuals in a single lobby had determined that brutality was more significant than expertise. 4,000 people are now having trouble making mortgage payments on loans that were solid only a few months ago. Marcus Thompson and Kesha Davis's inability to see past their own biases caused 4,000 people's lives to be turned upside down. COULDN single quotes to get the resolve to act morally when it was most important. 4,000 workers adding to unemployment lines, revising resume, educating prospective employers. The human cost of their former company's scandalous downfall was when housing payments became unaffordable for families receiving unemployment benefits. Children were removed from private schools and extracurricular activities because their parents were unable to pay for their college education. Dreams of retirement were put on hold forever as 401k accounts linked to them were looted to pay for needs. Overnight, Morrison Financial stock lost all of its value, and support groups were established among former workers at Morrison Financial are attempting to cope with the stress of losing not just their employment but also their professional identities due to circumstances beyond their control. According to career counselors, banking professionals' extraordinary urge to explain employment shortages brought on by institutional racism has nothing to do with urban mental health providers. Increased rates of sadness, anxiety, and suicide attempts in areas where Morrison Financial had closed branches among former workers who are finding it difficult to deal with the abrupt loss of their financial stability and Kesha herself and professional reputations. The painful irony of had it not been so tragic to see the outcome, her destiny would have been lyrical. A lady who had been making fun of someone she thought was a janitor for 30 minutes discovered herself doing nighttime janitorial labor, sweeping and cleaning restrooms in downtown business buildings, floors for minimal wage while battling to provide for and feed her own children. Former Morrison Financial workers found the employment market to be extremely difficult, but Kesha word had disseminated across the financial sector on the specific person accountable for the catastrophe. Her name and face was identifiable from the tapes that went viral, and her reputation was toxic. She discovered that the financial institution would touch her with a 10-foot stick. At 2 in the morning, pushing a cart through deserted corridors, while wearing a uniform beside Sunyan Samin, Elsa's business brand doing the precise task she had utilized as a means of destruction. The cleaning firm that employed her gave her $12 an hour, destroying the dignity of another woman. Less than the 1-hour salary she earned at Morrison Financial, where she'd reached a good middle-class income that included perks, vacation time and sick leave, and a pension plan that was now useless. Every night as she swept floors, emptied garbage cans, and cleaned surfaces at workplaces where individuals similar to her old self labored during the day, she was compelled to face the terrible reality of who she had become was that she was leading the same life she had thought. Vanessa Williams was leading, performing the identical tasks she had disparaged and ridiculed, seeing firsthand the she had before made them invisible and dismissed them, but Morrisonite's finances collapsed, and its former workers found it difficult to reconstruct their life from the ruins of institutional break. Vanessa Williams was producing a stunning and revolutionary piece. She transferred her enormous contract from the ashes of that awful day to a smaller organization called Minority Business Development Bank has been helping underprivileged areas for decades, but had never imagined managing such large-scale accounts. Maria Gonzalez, the head of the bank, founded her organization on the idea that everyone should have access to high-quality financial services irrespective of their economic status, skin color, or postal code. Backstory: when Vanessa's agents initially got in touch with them regarding the Williams tech transfer, Maria, the solutions account, believed it was a hoax call that banks like hers didn't get. They provided first-time house buyers and small business owners with clientele worth $47 billion. Purchasers, families establishing credit, and students obtaining community college loans. They provided financial services to those rejected by Morrison Financial and other institutions. But the transfer was genuine, and the Minority Business Development Bank quickly rose to prominence as one of the most influential financial organizations in the nation that was unexpectedly prepared to provide loans and services to historically marginalized populations. For years, the contract in conventional banking involved more than just money transfers. On a scale that changed whole communities, it brought opportunity and optimism. Communities that had been rejected by traditional banking institutions saw the creation of 3,000 new employment after being turned down for loans for centuries. Small enterprises now have access to funding that enabled them to recruit more people and pursue larger goals than they had previously thought feasible, with far-reaching consequences. Property values that go beyond individual loans and accounts. In previously overlooked as new companies emerged and people made investments in local home ownership schools, communities started to grow. Witnessed a rise in financing as library and community centers benefited from property tax payments. Encountered fresh local resources after suffering with budget constraints. Unemployment was claimed to have decreased by the governments of the cities where the Minority Business Development Bank extended its services, expanded tax bases, and the emergence of small businesses, which enabled them to make investments in infrastructure upgrades that had been postponed for years because of financial limitations. Vanessa also created the honor and children of service sector workers, such as janitors, can get complete college tuition through a work scholarship program. Housekeepers, security personnel, food service personnel, retail employees, etc. health benefits, everyone who works to keep society running but whose efforts are rarely recognized or honored. The scholarship, which included a straightforward yet impactful message that every job has dignity, all employees should be treated with respect, and no one's value should be. Beatty scholarship program was groundbreaking in its scale. As judged by the presumptions of others about their line of work, its vision, it offered coaching in addition to tuition funding, career guidance, internships, and emotional support for students who were frequently the first in grantees' families to go to college, and they were able to meet with experts in their fields, of access to networks that were previously prohibited to them out of curiosity and dated throughout their whole academic career. Throughout a span of 2 years, the program has provided financial aid to more than 500 students, seeking degrees ranging from business administration to environmental engineering, from social work to computer technology. These were investments in ending persistent cycles of economic inequity, not simply scholarships. Vanessa stayed as secluded as ever for generations. Avoiding, she continues to do her business in boardrooms, through interviews and public appearances. In confidential sessions, where media couldn't pry and cameras weren't permitted. But her deeds screamed louder, more impact than any news conference could have on the lady who was written off as merely the cleaning lady. Demonstrated that real power is about helping others up, not about feeling better than them. She never gave up, even when you had the resources and strength to do so. She never wrote op-eds regarding the Morrison financial episode. Despite interviews about it, she never made an appearance on television shows to address her experiences with prejudice. In banking, she let her acts to be her experience or to further her scholarship program. Assertion. Her investments serve as her defense, and her outcomes serve as her reaction to those who doubted her value. Yet the effects of her decisions extended much beyond the local areas that she personally impacted. Her business choices paid off, as evidenced by the events that transpired in Morrison Financial Bank on Tuesday morning. Turned into a case study for business schools worldwide, a company sensitivity training film, and millions of workers watched a warning film on the true costs of discrimination in the workplace. Harvard Business School created a whole course on every sector. The event examined the financial ramifications of institutional failures in addition to their ethical repercussions. Students studying prejudice examined the company culture and decision-making procedures that resulted in the catastrophe. Permitted it, as well as the leadership lapses that allowed corporate training to businesses, discovered they had more work than they could manage as institutions, rushed to make sure they weren't preparing for their own possible catastrophes. Role-playing games based on the managers were trained to identify the Morrison financial event, which became commonplace in customer service training. Indicators of employee prejudice, and take action before minor events become into disastrous errors. The tale served as a springboard for conversations on systemic racism, unconscious bias, and the significance of treating each in congressional hearings. It was mentioned that customers should be treated with decency, regardless of their looks or perceived position regarding prejudice in banking. That is referenced in scholarly works concerning corporate social accountability and utilized as proof in court instances pertaining to discrimination in the workplace. However, it also served as a reminder of something that everyone should keep in mind every day of their life, something that need to be emphasized in the workplace, taught in schools, and kept in mind during all of our interactions. Sometimes the janitor you make fun of today is the building's owner tomorrow. Sometimes the individual taking out your trash can is also the one who may use a single phone to drain your bank account. Sometimes the person you consider invisible has the ability to change. You're sometimes the quiet individual wearing plain clothing is the one in charge when the entire world vanishes. Kesha Davis discovered this lesson in the most painful way possible. Riches that you could waste in 10 life domesticable. And her tale serves as a cautionary tale for anybody who believes they can determine the value of another person solely on preconceptions and stereotypes. She stopped making fun of someone for being a housekeeper and started becoming one herself, from having authority over others to becoming helpless herself because she depossessivized providers to turning into one of the individuals she had previously hated. But the lesson is for everyone. Not just those like Kesha who allow their bigotry and resentment to cloud their judgment. We live in a society that continuously attempts to place people in value hierarchies, which leads us to pass judgment on other people. If you like this, it's based on what we can see rather than who they truly are, such as subscribe and share with others so that they may also learn.